Today on Connect, our guests are Curtis and John. So we have this understanding in society that love is love. That sounds great. But from a cultural perspective, that creates some issues. Would you please explain to us what is the problem with the idea of love is love? What is, I guess, the truth in that statement, and what is a problem with that statement?
Okay, John, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and take the first shot at this. It's kind of going to be stream of conscience. Yeah. So there certainly is. When you hear love is love, that sounds good. The Beatles song, right? There is certainly some appeal to that. But biblically, that has, there are some restrictions on that. From the very beginning, there are some restrictions on that. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, in a marriage, people, I think, expect other people to love them the way they love somebody, and they don't accept the person for being themselves sometimes. They expect the person to be who they want them to be. Okay. And love is accepting a person for who they are without expectations.
Yeah, and marriage is the institution that God has left us with, and this comes early on in right. Genesis and the rest of the way through. And then the church as the bride of Christ. I mean, marriage is obviously a really big deal to God, but in this idea of marriage, and there are lots of, if you want to dissect marriage, there's lots there to dissect. I mean, it's for procreation, mm-hmm. and so you see some of these other aspects of when you get to love is love, and it doesn't really matter. You had the Obergefell decision, and I wasn't necessarily going to get into that whole thing, but my definition of the Obergefell decision was if you love it, marry it, because it kind of opened the doors for, there's nothing is any better than anything else, and it doesn't matter as long as you love something. But in the Christian worldview, the biblical worldview, marriage was it was a big deal to God. Right. And it was for procreation, for, the whole family unit. And again, we are the bride of Christ. Right. So marriage was obviously a big deal, and is a big deal right. to God. Okay, so one of the things that culturally, this is all about, acceptance, or it's the new tolerance. And tolerance doesn't mean what it used to mean, because when I think of tolerance, when I tolerate something, it's I put up with something that I disagree with. That's not what the new tolerance. The new tolerance is acceptance, or even celebration. I would go even a little bit farther than that. So now it's not so much that, okay, you've decided that you're going to live your life the way you're going to live your life, and you know what? We're still going to be friends. I'm going to tolerate it, to know, you know what, you just go be you. You be the best you can be, and I totally celebrate. What are some of the problems with the new tolerance?
Well, I think it becomes people do what they want to do and not what the Bible tells us to do. You're not looking to the Word of God for guidance. You're going back to living life the way you want to live it. You live it, and Satan can deceive you and lead you away from God and down the wrong path.
Yeah, no, that's, you know what? When I asked the question, I wasn't sure I was going to get that answer. You answered it perfectly, in my opinion. That's it. You know what? And I use this with my students all the time. If I think you're doing something wrong, if I think you're doing something that is harmful potentially to your eternity, is the most loving thing for me to do to just say, you know what, John, you just go be you. Just be the best you can be, and you'll be fine? Or is it in fact to say, you know what, I love you, John, because I do, we're going to have this very difficult conversation, because you're absolutely right. It can be used to draw you away from God.
Yeah. It's kind of like driving down the street and you see a house on fire. You know, you'd want somebody to come. If it was your house, you'd want somebody to stop and say, "Hey,
Right.
your house is on fire.
Yeah.
Get out of the house." So if you're doing something that isn't biblically correct, then we're only doing it out of love
Right.
when we tell you that you need to do it.
Yeah,
the
and
biblical
you know
way.
what? And there's some nuance there, because boy, it's hard to have those conversations sometimes and
Yes.
have them come across. And sometimes they initially don't, because they just can't. But if people do understand it goes to. I think it's really important that you build relationship. If you and I don't know each other, and I just come up and say, "Hey, dude, you got to knock it off,"
Right.
and I can flower it however I want. But if I have a relationship with you and you know that I care about you at a whole bunch of levels, up to and including where you're going to spend eternity through the course of building those relationships, I think that's where you earn the right to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, I agree. You need to. You can't go out and just be calling people out that you don't know. That's not loving, because they're not going to accept what you tell them. So you need to be authentic with people and get to know them.
Yeah.
And like you say, if you see some way that they can need to change, then to share that with them.
Yeah, it's like the street evangelist who's out there. He doesn't know. There's nobody out there. It's turn or burn. You know what? Some people can pull that off. Generally speaking, it is done in the context of the local church, because the local church is where community is.
Right.